All right, welcome back, everybody, to the ATL Baseball Podcast. I'm Mike Shepard, your host today. I'm joined by Tyler Shewmaker of Vanderbilt University. We got linked up with him through the Lizaraga Boys, so we're super grateful that he's able to come on today. Before we get going, I'd like to shout out our sponsor, lineupcards.com. Lineupcards.com, you can design, print, custom 4-part lineup cards, 11 by 17 dugout cards, black, white, color. You send them your logo and your lineup, and they'll send you a proof, and they'll ship them out to you when it's all ready to go. So check them out, lineupcards.com. We've been using those guys forever. Great people, and they do great work. So, Coach Shewmaker, how are we doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on, and the Lizaraga boys, and getting to know Chico and Sammy through the years, and figuring out what they're all about. But I appreciate you having me on, and we get to talk some baseball and kind of shoot from the hip here and learn from each other.
That's the only way I know is shoot from the hip, procrastination. So I waited till about 15 minutes ago to do any type of research on here. So if anything's wrong on your Wikipedia, man, I can't, I
I don't
can't
even
help
know
that.
what's on there.
So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your journey and how you got to Vandy from, 18-year-old
Yeah, so
boy.
I've kind of yeah, so I grew up in small town Indiana. I wasn't a great baseball player. I would say I was average. I was a catcher. And after high school, I went to play at a junior college and at Wabash Valley Community College in Mount Carmel, Illinois. I was there for a year and then went to Kentucky Wesleyan College where I played as Division II in Owensboro, Kentucky. Played there for 3 years. And then from there, I knew I wasn't going to play professionally. I just knew that wasn't in the cards for me. So I did a lot of research and kind of jumped right into coaching. I had a math degree. So I have a secondary math education degree, which I always thought it would be a teacher and a coach. Go teach at a high school, coach high school baseball, do the whole deal. And then as I was moving out of my dorm room or my apartment at Kentucky Wesleyan, Coach Lil Pop, who was my college coach, called me and I was like, man, like, what does he want? I've already done my time here. Like, he's calling me to the office. Like, what's he want? But um, sure enough, I went to the office and I was moving out, like I said, and he said, "Do you want to stay on and coach with us next year?" And I had to finish up some classes and that kind of stuff. So I was like, yeah, I'll stay around. He's like, I have no money for you. You're gonna make nothing but lesson money and camp money. That's all I can provide. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I didn't know any better. I was 21 years old at the time, and sure enough, I coached there for a year, and then he let me do everything from camps to lessons to run anything I wanted to make a few bucks. Did that, and then from that coaching spring, I went to coach in the summer in Fayetteville, North Carolina, in the Coastal Plain League. That team isn't even around anymore. It's Fayetteville Swamp Dogs. They were in that league. Didn't know anybody down there. I just did some research and I knew I needed to get away from my comfort zone of Owensboro, Kentucky, and where I played. And so went down there, coached in the summer, had all realms of players from every different level, JUCO, D1, D2, it didn't matter. We had probably 50 guys in and out that summer because summer ball just moves at different pieces. And then halfway through that summer, I was doing some research because we were running out of pitching. Arms were getting tired; they were at their inning limits. I just called the closest Division I that I could find to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it was Campbell University.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of them, didn't know much about it, but I had a connection there with their pitching coach at the time, Chris Marks. We were both from Indiana. We had talked a little bit prior to that, maybe like a brief conversation. I called him and I said, "Do you have any pitchers that can come pitch for us?" And we had a long conversation. And come to find out, he had no pitchers that could come help us. But in that conversation, I just said, "Do you have any coaching positions open?" And he said, "Well, let me see. We did have some movement. I'll talk to our head coach, Justin Hare." And I said, "Okay, great." So he calls Coach Hare. And long story short, that summer, it was the director of operations, which I had no idea what that meant, but I knew that it could get my foot into Division I baseball. And so that's when I jumped on the ship of Division I baseball at Campbell University. I drove from Fayetteville to Bowie's Creek, North Carolina, which is about 30, 40 minutes. Had no idea where I was going. We're driving through cornfields and everything else, and then all of a sudden it opens up this beautiful university, and I'm like, whoa, this is great. Coach Hare shows me around. we talk. Eventually, he hires me as the ops guy. I was the ops guy for a year, which entails, travel, meals, all the off the field stuff that you can imagine. Not anything glamorous, nothing that I wanted to really be doing, but I knew that it could get my foot in the door. And then after 1 year there, I went to the volunteer assistant, which went back to making $0 in camp money and all that kind of stuff. And then after that year, we had some staff movement. Coach Marks went to Purdue. Coach Hare calls me. I was working at camp in Knoxville, Tennessee. He calls me. He's like, I need you to come back tomorrow, and we're going to hire you as the recruiting coordinator. So I did that for 2 years. And then that summer after, I guess it was summer of 21, I was out recruiting and got some calls from different people. And come to find out, the assistant that was at Vanderbilt had moved on to East Carolina at the time, and they were looking for a guy that knew catching, had done some recruiting, had helped with hitting, and a guy named Aaron Gershenfeld. I don't know if you know that name, but he is with the Yankees organization now. He was with Vanderbilt probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer than that. We're good friends through the catching world and just got to know each other in that realm of things. And he calls me and he says, "Hey, Coach Corbin just said that he was looking for a guy, and I put your name in." And I'm like, "Man, Coach Corbin's not going to call me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm at, he doesn't know who I am. There's no way that I'm going to end up there and that kind of stuff." But come to find out, a couple of days went by, and he called some of the contacts that we both knew in the baseball world. And that August, I got hired at Vanderbilt, and I'm going into year 3 here, or I'm in year 3 here now.
It's it's crazy how the journey happens and how fast it happens.
Mm,
It's a little bit
It
like
really is.
it's a little bit like
It really is.
recruiting.
And I would say the biggest thing that I can take from the places that I've been is I've been with really good head coaches that let me do my deal. They didn't try to micromanage, but they stepped in at the right times. But they also let me do the catching, let me fail, but fix it, that type of thing. And I think if I can reach out to a coach that is still trying to figure out his way, that's just getting into this college atmosphere, I would say, man, don't be afraid to fail. I think that's a big piece of it, is don't be afraid to make a decision that might not be right, because you can always fix it probably. But sometimes you just don't. You just have to fail to figure out what you're trying to get done.
I couldn't agree with that more. The whole piece of being with a head coach that trusts you to do your own thing, but that you can call on and say, "How did I do? Give me some feedback," and they'll tell you like, "You messed that up. We got to fix it,"
Mhm.
or probably should go about it a different way next time. It didn't work out so well. Along those lines, and I mean, it must have been surreal when Coach Corbin called. Because how you felt, where you're like, "Man, he's never gonna call me." It's probably how most young guys in your position, me included, would have felt. And then you get that phone call. It's like you're staring at the phone for like 3 rings. You're like, "Do I pick it up right away?
Yeah,
Do I just?"
it was wild because I was on the road recruiting for Campbell, and I was doing my job that I was tasked with there. I was doing my duties. I was out recruiting. I was actually at East Cobb watching a game. The first call that I got from different people, and a good friend of mine and a great baseball person. His name's Tom Griffin, at Carson Newman in Tennessee. He's worked the Vanderbilt camp for many years, and him and Coach Corbin are really good friends. And Coach Corbin actually called Griff about me, and then that's when Griff called me, and that was like the third or fourth person that had reached out and said, Coach Corbin is calling some people. Um, this might happen. Just be prepared for a call. Make sure you have everything in order. And then sure enough, I was back at Campbell. It's one of those conversations that you kind of don't forget, whenever he calls you for the first time. And I probably, like a lot of recruits feel, with the first time that he calls them, or, they get a call from one of us or whatever, you kind of remember that moment. And I was walking around the batting cages at Campbell. The cages are back behind left field wall. It's an indoor facility with 3 cages in it. and I just paced that facility the whole time that I was on the phone with Coach Corbin. And the type of guy that he is, he already knew so much about me. And I think that's a big realm of why he's such a good recruiter in this world, is because it goes much deeper than just being a college coach. It goes much deeper than being a high school baseball player for him. It's he gets to know who you are as a person. He knew my parents' names. He knew my sister's names. He knew everything about me that you could have found online or whatnot. And that was just awesome to me that he knew all that about, a guy that was coaching at Campbell that he was looking to hire. So it was a great conversation. We talked for about an hour and 10 minutes the first time we talked about everything. And then, I came up on an interview and did the whole deal. And he said, I'll call you back in 48 hours to let you know what's going to happen. And there's nothing more nerve wracking than leaving this place when you're like, man, I really want this. I really, really want to get this. And driving back to Bowie's Creek, North Carolina. And, sure enough, you know, 24 hours later, he called me and I got the job. But, the funny thing about that is I had bought a house in Bowie's Creek the day before Coach Corbin called.
Oh,
And so, yeah, life comes at you fast. It's one of those things that just happens, and you move and you make it work. But there's a lot of funny stories that go. Everybody has that story in the coaching world of something that happened, or they remember that call of when they first got an interview or whatnot at a job that was great. I remember the first day I walked on campus at Campbell. I remember the first day I walked on campus at Vanderbilt. It's something that you always take with you everywhere you go.
it's those little moments that like you'll never forget, and it's a little bit like the a baseball college baseball team. We always talk to the guys about you don't always remember the wins and losses as much as you do, the bus rides, the hotel stays, the first call from coach, the first time you met your best friend,
Hmm.
any of that stuff. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of taking that chance and going, and like you, when you first got that call, when you were moving out of your dorm, coach said, do you want to be
Hmm.
you want to coach? I got no money. I got nothing for you, but it's a good opportunity. You're young. Like you just do it, man. And then life's gonna open doors for you, and you either want to step through them, and sometimes you wish you hadn't, and sometimes it's like that's the best decision I ever made. And yeah,
Yeah, and I would say this, it's something where whether you're a coach, whether you're in high school trying to get recruited, whether you're maybe a coach that's trying to make the next step, or you're coaching high school and you want to get into college or whatever it might be, you want to take the next step in your life, whether it be a recruit or a young adult or an adult. I think the biggest thing that I can tell people, and I say this all the time, is just fully immerse yourself in what you want to do, whether it be coaching, whether it want to be a Division I player, get recruited at the college level. It doesn't really matter at that term. It's literally just about fully immersing yourself in what you want to do. When I was at Campbell as the ops guy as a volunteer, it was just literally trying to take every second that I had and think about how can I help Campbell get to Omaha. I think that's the mentality you have to wake up with every day when you're trying to build yourself is what can I do to help this team get to Omaha, and I think and when you're in a place like Bowie's Creek, there's nothing to do. I just be frank with you. There's not a whole lot going on. So I was at the field. It was throwing BP. It was doing everything extra with the guys to kind of help them, but also learn myself. What works in the coaching world. What can I say? What cues work? And then when I took the job at Vanderbilt, it really becomes what can we do to win the national championship, get to Omaha, win the national championship. And when you think about those and you put your feet on the ground each day and you have that in your head, it really gives you a purpose. And I think as a recruit, as a high school player, it's what can I do to get recruited by this school? What can I do to get recruited, period? Whatever level you're looking to go to, when you wake up, whenever every move that you make in some capacity has to be with that in the back of your head. Because if it is, you're gonna find a way to get it done. And if it's not, and it can be put to the back burner a little bit, then you might not reach the goal that you're really looking for. And now, someday if I'm ever um, moving up, or as I hope to do, it's like, what can I do to be a recruiting coordinator? What can I do to be a head coach? And I think those are the mindset you have to have, but they're stepping stones along the way of being really, really good at where you are right now and fully immersing yourself in that.
That's been a common theme on the previous episodes, and it's such a cliche, but I always say like cliches are around because they're true. They're just
Hmm.
extremely corny, but
Yeah.
be where your feet are
Yeah.
is has been such a big thing that coaches have said, and advice that they've given is like wherever you're at that moment in your life or whatever job and what have you, just be there, be present, do the best you can. Have some goals in mind. If you want to be a
Mhm.
Division 1 player, then you need to do Division 1 player things. You need to do the research of where do I metrically where do I got to be
Mhm.
off the field, where do I got to be in the weight room, where do I got to be, and if you put 100% effort into being there and where you need to go, you'll give yourself a chance to be a Division 1 player. And you might not be a Division 1 player. You might get to Division 3, but if you didn't go about your business like you wanted to be a D1 player, then maybe you would never even be a D3 player or a D2
Yeah.
player
Yeah.
or
And I think, yeah, just to piggyback on that and just to build off of that is sometimes you were talking about off the field. Some things off the field have to go to the back burner a little bit, right? It's relationships, it's doing extracurricular things off the field that might have to take a back seat, whether you're in high school or whether you're a coach trying to make it. Like there might be a time where you're like, okay, I need to really focus on baseball, my career, um, my playing career or my coaching career, and everything else kind of just has to take a back seat at certain times. And then once you get to a point where you feel like you're at a good spot and you can find a partner or balance those certain type of things, then that's when you got to you kind of find a different path in a way. But I think the one thing that I had freedom to do at Campbell whenever I was there is I was single. I was 22. It was like, man, this is awesome. Like, let's go do baseball stuff all the time. And then, I look back as a player, I don't know if I fully immersed myself enough. I feel like I worked pretty hard as a player. But now it's like I see what guys have, and I'm like, man, you have no excuse not to be as good as you possibly can be
mm-hmm.
with the facilities, with all the coaching that is around, and travel ball, and high school coaches, and facilities, and different things. Like if you want to be really, really good at this sport, and you buy into it, then there's resources all over the place for you to be able to do that.
Every time we would recruit a kid, and I've said this so many times, that so many kids would always say, Coach, I'm the hardest working kid out there. And I try to tell guys that relative to your surroundings, you probably are one of the harder working kids. Every time you go up when you go to college, you have a full team of you and
Hmm.
people that work as hard as you, probably way, way, way harder. So, however hard you think you're working, it's probably not hard enough. There's
Hmm.
probably
Yeah.
areas and avenues. And I think as you grow older, you know, like you said, when you were 22 and single, you were like, let's do baseball all the time. Let's only do baseball. And then when you get to be like Coach Corbin's age, he's not 22 and single. He's got a family and you have all these different things. You find a way to work as hard as you did when you were 22, but also you have all these other things. Like you mature and you evolve. And I think it's part of it is having like an open mind, and as you get older you're going to mature, you're going to figure things
Mm.
out, you're going to figure out where maybe you thought when you were 22 that you were working like really hard, but you were probably wasting a bunch of time that you didn't even realize you were wasting. And it's the
Yeah, and
same.
I think I've been very fortunate to see coaches in this world, whether it be Coach Hare or Coach Robinson or Coach Marks at Campbell, or now with Coach Baxter and Coach Brown and Coach Corbin here, of being able to balance those situations of family and life and baseball. is spectacular. And learning from those guys in that realm is stuff that you don't even think about. But it goes back to maturity and time management is the biggest thing. And when guys step foot at Vanderbilt, I think the biggest learning curve for them is being able to be their true authentic self, but also learning maturity along the way. The guys that make it in this program, when they step foot on campus as a freshman, mature quickly. And I think that is something that is taught. You know, maturity can be taught. I truly believe that. And being around other guys that are mature and that kind of thing is huge. But maturity is the first step to developing yourself in my realm. Because when you get mature, you learn um, time management. You learn what you need to work on. There's some self discipline there, but none of that gets reached without maturation of mind and who you are.
You gain so many things as you get older. Like perspective, in my opinion, is one of them. Um, and some guys are just sometimes they're gonna get there at their own pace, and that could be one thing. It's frustrating as a coach. It's just like why can't why can't you see this? Like you're gonna get there in like 4 or 5 years. I just need you to trust me when I'm telling you, like, and just get there now, because the sooner you get there and the sooner you can mature and realize the world's not out to get you, or realize what your true potential is, the better off everybody is gonna be. And it's just the process we go through with these kids. I would ask, do you think, like you said, when guys, the biggest thing is for guys to learn or become mature, would you say that that's a Vanderbilt thing? Would you say that's a Division I thing? Would you say that's just a young college baseball player at any level thing?
I would say that I would say it's at any level. You know, when you step on foot at a college campus, whether it be Division I, Division II, whatever, um, there's going to be guys that are older than you. That's a fact. Guys are going to be older than you. They're going to have more experience, and I think the learning curve there can be really tough. But I think the guys that figure it out the quickest are the guys that can sit back and watch the older guys go about their business and learn. It's almost like a big brother mentality. When you can sit back and watch the big brother and see what he's doing and be like, oh, I need to do that, or I need to really latch myself onto this guy because he does a lot right. That's the first step of maturity is finding somebody that does something really well and being like, man, I need to follow in his footsteps. And you see those guys do that here all the time. You know, you see freshmen come in and they latch on to an upperclassman. It's like, whoa, he's starting to figure it out a little bit quicker because he's taking the lead of being a leader and he's latching on to Johnny or whoever it might be, and that guy's really helping him come along. And I think that can go for any body, in any sport. You know, when you step on foot in campus on campus, or as a coach too. You know, I was an immature coach when I got to Campbell. There is no doubt about it. I thought I had all the answers. I thought I knew everything that was right. Um, Especially when I got to that recruiting coordinator and I got my own office and it was like, man, this is cool. I have all the answers. I'm going to do it this way, this way, this way. But it doesn't work like that. Like it never works like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't work like that when you step your foot on campus for the first time either as a freshman, no matter where you're at. You think you know what you're doing, but you really don't. And the best thing to do is sit back and watch and learn from the older guys and see how they do it and then kind of put your own spin on that. Why while still being your true authentic self. Don't lose I think the biggest thing is not to lose sight of who you are as a person and your personality. Because if you can match the maturation with who you are as a person and where you grew up and what you like and build that into your true character, that's when you see a mature person. And that's when the skill level of baseball or coaching really take off.
This is why life is so difficult, because we want you want guys that are go-getters and that will go out and do things on their own without being asked. And like you said, you thought when you were the recruiting coordinator, like, I'm going to do it this way, I'm going to be better, I'm going to all these things. And sometimes it may not make sense, but the way that the guy did it before you, it had to be done that way.
Hmm.
Like when I was at coaching at Oglethorpe, there was a lot of things that we wish we could have done differently, and we'd get a new coach in there, and Coach Sam Agnew um, comes to mind when it would just be like, well, he would say, why are we doing things like why this makes no sense, and we're like, Sam, it doesn't like sometimes we would have to take a kid um, that admissions would want us to take, and because we were Division 3, we had a bigger roster, and he would get
Mm.
so frustrated and so angry. It's like, dude, sometimes we know that this kid probably is the last guy on the roster and doesn't make us that much better, but when you want that kid that is right on the borderline of grades and you've helped the admissions office, they're going to help you. But if
Hmm.
you're like, nah, we're not doing it this way, and it's so hard because as a young guy, it's hard to understand that, and it's hard to know when to put your own spin on things and when that's the right thing to do versus, oh, this groundwork's already been laid for me, let me follow in these footsteps, but like you said, still be myself, still put
Hmm.
my own spin. And it's just hard. It's a whole maturing process, I mean,
It really is.
like,
And I think, and I talk about players maturing and when they got walk on foot at Vanderbilt, like I had to mature when I stepped foot on Vanderbilt too, because they had just come off a national championship and a national championship runner up, so it's like, whoa, what am I going to put on this? And I just need to sit back and watch and learn from these guys. And I did. But the thing about Vanderbilt is there's no egos. Like there is not a coach in this office that has an ego or wants to boast the numbers or the rings or anything that they have. I think that's the coolest thing about it is everybody is egoless here, and that is left at the door. And what I learned very quickly is they want my input. Like you are hired for a reason to bring your input, and it's not going about, it's not reinventing the wheel, but it also could be putting your own spin on things or a new language. And I think that's something that recruits have to learn too when they step foot on campus. It's not about reinventing who they are. They were recruited for a reason, and they are coming to a Vanderbilt or a Kentucky Wesleyan or a Campbell for a reason, and they need to learn. And as a coach, the coaches are there to give you input on what can make you better and what is going to get you most prepared for that level, but the groundwork more than likely has been laid because you're there. It's trusting in that, but also being open to coaching in a way of like, all right, they do know what they're doing and I do need to listen, but I can make this my own in some certain way.
I wrote down a few things to talk about today, and one of them was making a name for yourself, and another one was like, how do you deal with expectations, and just by natural conversation, not even having to like try to transition into these, we've discussed, kind of two of those topics, which I love. Like, I wanted, just reading over your bio and whatnot, I wanted to ask you, like, Kentucky Wesleyan Division 2, how you make a name for yourself, not just while you're a Division 1 coach. Like, we can call it like it is. Like, you're at Vandy. That's pretty big deal. A little Kentucky Wesleyan kid. And did you guys? I played at Ohio Valley at Kentucky Wesleyan. Did you guys move to the GMAC
So
conference?
yeah, so my first year coaching there was when we moved to the GMAC conference, and so um, that is when we made that transition. And so, yeah, I would say that making a name for yourself is kind of one of those things where I don't know if you make it for yourself, but you're around really good people that can help you make a name for yourself and give you the freedom to do that.
Right.
And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, just being around people that make you better, but also allow you to just go experiment. And for any coach, any guy running a facility, anybody doing, even a player that wants to get into coaching, give lessons. I think that's a big thing that can really help you when you give lessons to kids, to middle school kids, or even younger than that. You can experiment with things. Like I know that might not be what every parent wants to hear, but there is some experimental work that goes into lessons. And when you're doing that, you might catch on to a cue that can help you later in life. Like I might use a cue that I learned giving a lesson to a 7-year-old at Kentucky Wesleyan, well, 7, 8 years ago now, that might help a kid at Vanderbilt. As crazy as that seems, those are lessons that continue on throughout your coaching career and your journey. And I think it's important to write all that stuff down. What works? You know, if you have a guy that is is stepping out or striding to close and he's not getting his hips open, or a catcher that has a bad pre-pitch, what can you do to help that guy? What cue can you give him? And then as a player, whatever that coach gave you, write that down, because too many guys don't take notes now. They don't want to write. Everybody's on their phone. Everybody is whatever on their iPads, which I do that too. I text, I call. I don't use much pen and paper. I have an iPad. Like you write all that. You have all this technology. Like how can we use that to better ourselves? And I think one way is to really write it down, even if it's a voice memo that you put in your phone. Like my pre-pitch was bad today. Coach Shewmaker told me to do this, and it worked. Use that. And as a coach, hey, Dom's pre-pitch was this. This is a cue I use for him. It worked for him. Maybe later in life you can use that for another player down the road.
It's everybody learns differently, and how we get across kids is different. So two coaches may be saying the exact same thing, and a lot of times they are, but they're just saying it in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
and it resonates with one kid, but the other coach doesn't resonate with him. It's not that anything that coach is doing wrong. It's the same thing if you have two players and you tell them they're doing the same thing, they need the same correction, and you tell them the same cue, and one kid picks it up like this, and the other kid's like, he can't get it. You just have to tell him that in a different way. And it's just like you have a coaching toolbox, right? You just want to fill that toolbox with as many tools as possible. And sometimes it's a wrench that does the same thing, but you need the different sizes. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
and
it's
I will say this. I will say this. I work with hitters too. As you know, like I work with the catchers and I work with hitters, and I've done that my whole career. And I think something that's been really cool. When I was at Campbell, I worked with Justin Hare, who's the head coach, but also runs the offense on the hitting side. And here I work with Mike Baxter, who was a big leaguer and um, has coached here. I think he's in year 7 now or whatever. I've worked with two different hitting guys, but essentially the same stuff that we did at Campbell, we do here in different ways. And I think what you're saying is very interesting, because I've seen both sides of a guy that, and it's always a lot of an approach based talk, but how we break that down might be different. Like it might be called something different now than what we called it at Campbell when I was there. And I think that's a really cool experience for me, is learning from those guys, because now I have different words that I can use or whatnot, to bring, like you said, the same thing to light. And I think if you're a player listening to this, like write down what works for you, because you're your best self coach. I don't care what anybody says. Like you are your best self coach, whether you are an adult in the coaching world, or you're a player trying to get recruited, or you're a player at college. You are your best coach, and you know what works for you, and you know what cues you need to tell yourself every time you walk into the cage, or walk into up to bat, whatever it might be. And writing that stuff down only is going to make you remember it when you get in those moments.
from a catching
Mhm.
standpoint. Let's. I know Chico wanted me to talk about that just because he does some work with our catchers, and he wanted someone smart to come on and talk about catching. Obviously, we probably don't need to have you get down in a stance and get in front of a pitching machine or anything. But for a high school kid, 14 to 17, what's important?
Mhm.
What should they work on? What are you looking for in a player?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is self evaluation. I think it's one of those things where um, a lot of stuff happens before the pitch is actually caught that can make you or set you up for success. And I think when we look at a guy, we look at stance, we look at pre pitch movements, and we look at flexibility and durability. And those three things you have to look at before you even talk about the technical side behind it. And so there's a lot of different realms of those stances, and we could have a whole podcast on knee down stance versus 2 feet stance, and what's needed to put down, and all this kind of stuff. that could open up a lot of different avenues. But
You
I will
you
say
can touch
that,
on a few of those things if you want to just hit on them
yeah,
and
and I
whatever
think,
you want. Take it wherever you want, man.
yeah, and so what I have kind of looked at as a hierarchy of receiving, and I don't think that we can experiment with stances before we can catch the ball. And I think it's one of those things where we want to crawl before we run. And so when you're looking at this, we want to have a good stance. And what I mean by a good stance is having freedom with the elbows, giving the umpire a really good look, and understanding when to use certain stances. I think can be a baseline for this. And what I tell our guys is if you want to be a knee down guy, that's fine. Yeah, I have no problem with that. And I am a big proponent of knee down stances. I think it gives us a lot of benefits. But we have to know what knee to be down in the right timing. And so what we tell our guys is in there as a right-handed hitter with nobody on base, we want to be left knee down. Left-handed hitter, we want to be right knee down. And that's simply for a couple reasons. One, we want to be set up underneath the hitter, and because you think about where the umpire is going to be, and the umpire is set up inside part of the hitter. And so we want to be opposite knee of the hitter down because that gives him a free lane to the strike zone. He's set up over the knee that is down. That gives him a free look at the zone. But it also takes away that bottom tier. If I'm on a knee, if I'm on 2 feet, if the pitch is below my knees in my stance, it's an easy ball call for him because that pitch is down. But what us dropping a knee does is it takes away that bottom line. He doesn't have that as a reference point anymore. So we drop that knee and he doesn't know where the bottom of the zone is by our stance. We're eliminating that factor for us. And so it gives us freedom of the glove, allows us to give him a free look, and it takes away the bottom of the zone tier for him because he can't base it off of our knee anymore. He's strictly working on the hitter and what he sees with the glove. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of the knee down. Now with runners on base, what we have went to at Vanderbilt more so is just right knee down all the time. And I know that still takes away some of contradicts what I was saying right before that, but I believe that it is easier to throw and block out of that right knee down stance than it is left knee down. Because the cue word for us to throw to second base with the right knee down is just taking our right foot to where our right knee is to throw to second base. And so it eliminates that jump out that you see with guys with 2 feet. And so when we really look at that, we are opposite the hitter with nobody on base. Then when runners get on base, we're right knee down. That's as simple as I can put it to make it where you're on the right knee at the right time.
What if you got a lefty catcher?
A lefty catcher, that is going to come one of these days. You laugh, but
It
I
is.
fully
It
believe.
will. It will.
Well, it'll definitely come, in my opinion, at and it'll be experimented with at some minor league where they're going to automatic strike zones. And so whenever they look at that automatic zone and they have a guy that's left-handed that can still throw and still block, then they're going to put him back there, and you better be able to hit. You know.
This was going to be my next question for you. Like you said, write things down. I got my little, notepad here. I do write things down, especially during interviews, because, like, sometimes you'll say something and you'll talk for 5 minutes, and I want to go back to whatever you said. But Major League is going to go to automated strike zones.
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe that. I'd wager any amount of money on that. Receiving, then, it's going to be irrelevant, no?
Yeah. In some capacity, it will. The art of framing pitches will go by the wayside. There is
And
no doubt.
it'll just be, can you block and can you throw?
Mm-hmm. And really, what I've had to adjust at my time, even at Vanderbilt, is I receiving has always been king, and it will continue to be king because we do it so much. Like you receive and you try to win strikes more than anything else you do behind the plate. There is no doubt about that, and numbers back that up, stats back that up, all that kind of stuff. But what we're seeing is where we saw a downtick in run game and people trying to steal bases, it's starting to go back up. And so what that means for us is we have to go back to evaluating how we train catchers. And we're still going to receive every day. There's no doubt we're going to do receiving drills, but something that we've incorporated more even now than my first year here, and I'm in year 3, we're talking about a 2-year gap, is the ability to throw out of different stances because we still want to be in that best receiving stance we can possibly be in. But now we have to have a little bit better throwing stance. And so it's taking that right knee down that I was talking about with runners on base and trying to change that in different ways, whether it be wide, whether it be narrow, and still be able to throw out of that stance. So if you see some of our guys, they'll go in what I call a sprinter stance. So it's a real narrow stance with their feet. So the right knee's down, the left leg is tucked right underneath them. And that's what we call a sprinter stance because it's easy to get out of shoot. You think of a sprinter getting out
Mhm.
of the starting block. That is what we call like a stance with Enrique Bradfield at first base, where we know he's going to go at some point. We have to be in that stance. And then we have a wider right knee down stance, and that's just where the left leg kicks out because now maybe that's a truck at first base, and the only way that he's going to steal is potentially by a pass ball or a ball that kicks away from us. So now we go to receive block mode, and I think whenever you're in that sprinter stance, if the guy doesn't go, you can kick out. You have enough time to kick out, but it's something that you have to train. And if he does go, you keep that left leg underneath you. So it's taking the best receiving stance and manipulating them in a way that allows us to do different skills at a high level.
That's so interesting and so much more in depth than a non-catching guy. Although I may look like a catching guy, but it's so much more in depth than you'd ever think of. And I mean, obviously, you guys have a top-notch staff every year.
Mhm.
With we see you guys play on ESPN and whatnot. There's some nasty pitches that are thrown.
Absolutely.
How how do you how do you block those balls like a 0-2 slider in the dirt with a guy on third?
Hmm.
The pitching coach can't always worry about, well, is a catcher going to block this? I know that the slider in the dirt's the best pitch here. There's 2 outs. We got to get this guy out. But also, he's going to throw a nasty slider. There's a chance it goes in the dirt. Like, how do you manage that aspect of it?
Well, I will say this: the if you're a catcher listening, the best way to gain trust from a pitching coach, from a catching coach, and more importantly, from a pitcher that's on the mound, is to block all the pitches that he throws, whether it be in the bullpen, whether it be in a live scrimmage, whatever it might be. Showing that you have the ability and the want to block is going to let those pitchers have trust that you're going to get it done. And I think that's the first step. The second step would be just really, really training hard blocks. I think that there's a time and a place to train technique blocks, whether it be a roll drill, which we love to do, where you literally just roll the ball to the catcher and he takes his hand and his glove and blocks it, right? Like that is a technique drill, in my opinion. Um, but there's also that time for random blocks, and we love randomized drills here. You have to get the technical part done of how to receive, how to block, how to throw. All that stuff's great, and that's a build up to a randomized session. And what we do is we use a bunch of different types of balls, whether it be squishy T balls or real baseballs or any kind of thing that gives a different variation to the drill is going to make that mind go and make you figure out a way to block it. And so there's a lot of those drills that we do in the training sessions, but also you can't miss that first step, and it's really just getting the trust of your pitchers and your pitching coach of blocking in sessions where it's not glamorous, right? Like it is not glamorous, and the last part that I'll talk about with blocking on this is what is a good block. I ask that to catchers all the time. From the time that we get here in the fall until wherever we finish in the spring, I'm always going to ask a guy, what is a good block? And you get a plethora of answers. You get, well, if it blocks right here, it hits the plate, it hits right off my chest, my belly button, all that kind of stuff. And in the big realm of things, well, let's just boil it down to this: does the base runner advance or not? If he doesn't advance, then it's a good block. I don't care if it went off your mask, your glove, your body, your chest. It doesn't matter. Does he advance or not? If he does, it was a bad block. If he doesn't, it's a good block, right? Like, I don't care how pretty it is. I don't care where it hits you, but we have to call it what it is and what is a good block and what's not.
That's great on results. We had a
Yeah.
we had a coach that we coached with, one of our best friends who passed away a few years back, but he would always say great on results. Me and Gio is the head of our ATL organization, and he was the
Yeah.
head coach at Oglethorpe. And we were so process driven because, and this is going to talk a little bit about what you were just talking about of randomized training, right? At some point, baseball realized, if you want to work on dirt ball reads, throwing 100 pitches straight in the dirt and having guys run to second base is no different than just a sprint drill, right? Like,
Right.
how can we create being random, like you talked about? And because baseball is random, you're going to be on
Yeah.
first base how many times before you get a dirt ball? You don't know.
You don't
So
know.
if you don't practice that randomness, or you don't practice I'm not going to go here. Oh, it's a dirt ball. I need to go on this one. You're never going to be good at it. And I think it takes, you talked about relationships with coaches and players. It takes such a good relationship with your players to build trust, for them to feel like it's okay to fail
Mm-hmm.
and not get frustrated when you give guys, you have those days where you got to practice really hard blocking drills, and guys are going to
Mm-hmm.
be really bad at it, especially to start, before they get good at it. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's like hitting. You're going to put the nastiest slider on the machine, and maybe you don't start with the pitch mix of 94 mile an hour fastball and an 87 mile an hour slider with the best spin rate that you guys will see all season, plus a changeup where you're mixing them all. Maybe you just say, hey, this is the slider, we're going to hit 20 hacks off of it, and you build up to it. But the randomized training is something that we even started doing at this level, and we started doing when we were coaching in college at Oglethorpe. But it's really hard. Like, it's baseball's already hard enough. You're going to fail as it is,
Mm-hmm.
and getting guys to buy into that training is hard. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that you even do that from a catching standpoint.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely days where it's like, all right, you're going to block to your glove side, block to your throwing side, or whatever.
But
I
that's
think
technique and
uh,
fundamentals,
that is technique, right? But then as you build time, there's going to be a point in a game where you don't expect this ball to be in the dirt and it's going to be spiked. Like, it's going to happen. And so what we do a lot, and if you're trying to look for ways to train this as a high school player, as a college player, and you're listening to this, I think you just take a thing of old baseballs, and the first thing I would do is color dots on them. And red is receive, maybe a black Sharpie is throw to second base, and then a green Sharpie would be third base, whatever it might be. That's the first way to randomize training, is literally just dots, because you have to react to whatever color comes out of the machine. I love that drill.
that's awesome. Keep going.
And then what I also like is if you have tennis balls, or you have what we call Incrediballs, and they're not that expensive. They're just softer baseballs. There's a bunch of people that make them now,
Hmm.
and what you can do is you can have it set up for on a junior hack attack per se. You can have this as a normal groove fastball down the middle, but then when the Incredible shoots out of there, it's a dirt ball, because it doesn't have the same, um, I guess, what would you call it, the firmness as the
Yep.
baseball, so it
Yep.
just shoots straight down. And so that is a great drill to just train blocking randomly, because they don't know what's coming, and we do that a lot. And I move the machine, and it's a competition. And another competition drill that we do is, if you have more than one catcher, have a guy behind the plate, and then if you have, say you have three catchers, you have one on each side of home plate, and then you have the catcher that's actually blocking, and it's a point system, so you keep tallies. If it's 2 points if the guy that is actually catching blocks it and grabs it, and it's a point for either other guy who can grab it before the catcher does, because that literally trains killing the baseball right in front of you and grabbing it, so the runner doesn't advance. Right? It's just a way to get competition into training, where it can become monotonous at times of catching, are receiving, blocking, throwing, bunts, whatever. But just adding that randomized competition in there makes them better, but also makes it more fun too.
I mean, you have to make it more fun. I mean, baseball is.
Yeah,
I say it all the time. Like baseball sucks sometimes. Like I love the
it
game
can.
more than anything, but when you're, I'm sure when catchers heard you say the best thing you can do is block all the time, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
a short box or a
Oh,
bullpen on a Tuesday when the guy's thrown on Sunday, and catchers know which pitch. They're like, I'm not catching any bullpens out of this guy. Nope, nope, not a no shot. He spikes too many pitches, and then they hear you
I've been
say
there, right? I was a catcher. I've been there. Like I didn't want to catch that guy.
no. They hear
But
you say
now
that, they're like, oh man,
as a coach, I look back and I'm like, this guy needs to catch so and so because he needs to work on this random eye. Maybe he's going to misfire 95 at the top of the zone and then spike a slider. Like he needs to catch him because he needs to see it. And if you're a younger catcher that's going into college, you want those bullpens. I know it doesn't sound glamorous and it doesn't sound like right now you want them, but I promise you, in time, catching guys that sometimes don't know where it's going to go, the wild stallion that's just going to throw it all over the place, besides the thoroughbred who's just going to groove it and knows where everything's going. Catch the stallion every now and then, right? Like
yeah,
it's going to make you better in the long run. And I try to mix that up as much as I can for our catchers here at Vanderbilt, is of catching different types of guys. Because if you go back to talking about receiving a little bit, I know we're backtracking here,
no,
but
it's fine.
there is a thing to, it's called cheating where the pitch is going to go. We see a lot of nasty stuff, whether it be two seams, hard sliders, cutters, the change ups that are sharp. And what I mean by cheating of where it's going is we can't pre pitch just straight down or straight back every time. The pre pitch at times has to be where the ball is supposed to go, right? So if it's a right handed two seam, maybe I want to pre pitch to my left shin guard a little bit instead of straight down, because now I'm matching that angle that that pitch is going to be coming in on. And so working through that in the bullpen is great because some guys have high ride and they pitch at the top of the zone and we can't just pre-pitch straight down, or they might have sink, so we now have to pre-pitch different. And learning that builds a trust as a catcher too, to be back there from the pitchers, because they're like, man, this guy really knows my stuff. Like I feel good throwing to him because he's going to block and he knows my stuff. I want that guy behind the plate. And there's nothing better or more satisfying for a catcher that has a pitcher walk up to me, Brownie, Bax, Corb, and say, I want so and so catching me because he does everything right. He works his tail off back there. Like, yeah, he might hit 150 or whatever, but in the long run, these pitchers really, really want to throw them. If you can't pitch, you can't win. So that's a big accomplishment to be the guy that they want back there.
It reminds me of a situation we had this past summer, and it might be a little bit longer. Sorry, I'll try to shorten it. I had a kid that we had two catchers this summer. One of the second catcher was a pitcher and catcher. He ended up hurting himself, so I really had like 1.5 catchers, and so this kid caught most of our games, and he hit about a buck 20, but he was like just a brick wall, man. I mean, a soft brick wall. He was great, and one of his buddies was pitching a lefty. Doesn't throw very hard, soft throwing lefty. It was like his third game catching this weekend, and I did a good job of getting, only catching him once a day and getting him out when I could. We were facing a pretty good team, like one of the traveling teams that brings in, it was like a White Sox team out of Louisiana. You guys actually might even be familiar with them. They're pretty good. This lefty was spiking fastballs. Like, normally had pretty good command, but he went on a week-long trip and he's like, yeah, coach, I've been throwing. Of course, he probably hadn't been throwing. He's just been spiking fastballs, and his curveball is slow. It doesn't matter. After one inning, the catcher comes off and he's very like cool headed, like chill. He comes off in the corner of the dugout. Him and the pitcher are going at it, and they're going at it, and he's like, quit spiking fastballs, yada yada yada. And when kids that normally don't get upset. They get so upset they get tears in their eyes. That was his
Yeah.
catcher. He's just like he's so mad he's got tears in his eyes, and I had to pull him off to the side, and I remember telling him, "Hey, listen, you have every right to be mad. However, I would I want to just give you a little piece of information. As a catcher, if that pitcher is scared or he's nervous to throw certain pitches in certain areas to you as a catcher, he's going to he's not able to elevate what his talent is. He's not able to pitch
Hmm.
above his talent level because not only is he scared to get hit, like, and he doesn't want to get hit, he's worried about what coach is going to say. He's worried about his catcher, who he spends the most time with, getting on him because he's spiking fastballs. I was like,
Yeah.
if I tell you you need to stop striking out, what are you gonna tell me? I would hope you tell me like I'm not trying to strike out, coach. I can assure you that pitcher is not trying to spike fastballs. Like he's not trying
Right.
to give you bruises on his arm. The most important thing you can do is block that ball, give it back to him, pat him on the butt, and say, make a better one. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
do do better. You got to instill confidence as a catcher because if guys don't feel confident to throw with you, and pitching guys will tell you this, a, the wrong pitch call with conviction is better than the right pitch call with no conviction. So
Correct.
if a pitcher doesn't have any conviction and doesn't trust that his catcher is going to block it, how well do you think that 0-2 slider is going to go?
Yeah.
You,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
um,
Like, those are the ones that get out of the ballpark, right? So, yeah, I think that's a big thing is developing that trust in each other, and a lot of it comes from body language too, right? Like it doesn't
oh,
always have to be a verbal command. It's a lot of body language, and body language for me also goes back to targeting with the glove too, right? If we know that this pitch is supposed to be in the dirt, you might show him a target at the top, but also like get him down there, right? We say this all the time, and if you ever hear the dugout and you hear me, it's like, hey, get him back in the zone, get him back in the zone. And that is just me saying, like, target it different. Somehow, some way, get this pitcher back in the zone because he's lost his sights. Change his sights in some way because it might be with the glove, it might be with how you're setting up, but whatever it might be, you have to change this guy's sights in some capacity. And that goes back to body language as well and knowing what each pitcher needs. And this is something Coach Griffin from Carson Newman taught me a long time ago. Is he compares the catcher to the jockey, right? You're the jockey riding the horse in the Derby or in a big race. Some of those times, sometimes you're gonna just have the guy that's out in front, and you just have to ride him to the finish, right? You're just back there catching everything, throwing it back. So be it. And then there's those times where you're in the middle of the pack or the back of the pack, and you got to whip them in shape a little bit. And that's the jockey that has to ride pretty hard. And you know which thoroughbreds on the mound you can whip in the ass, or the ones that you can just ride to the finish.
it's it's it goes in the long lines of coaching. It's the same thing with coaching. It's like
Same thing.
which kids you have to pat on the butt when really you want to knock them over the head and say, "What is your problem?" And then
Yep.
which kids that a pat on the butt's not going to do it. You got to be like,
Yep.
"Hey, get your shit together." Like I was that
Yep.
player where I thought I wanted a pat on the butt, but really, you know, I needed somebody to yell at me. And
Yeah.
my high school coach would yell at me and I'd hated him. And then I'd go to a coach that was like never yell and it would just not always positive, but just like, and then I realized like I need to be yelled at. I need to be
Yeah.
criticized. I need you to make me feel like guilt trip me. I
Yeah.
that's what I need. And the catcher, like you said, catcher's the same way, and that's just spending time with your pitching staff. That's catching guys even when you don't want to catch them, and it's gonna hurt, but nobody signed up to catch thinking they were never gonna get a bruise in their forearm, and you know,
Right. It just goes back to getting to know people, right? Like that is a huge, huge aspect in this game and life. whatever it might be. Whether you're a coach, you have to get to know the players on a different level than just at the field, and knowing what they need in different realms. But why they play, what they like to do off the field, and what makes them tick. Because if you can find that stuff, you can make them go on the field. And then same thing as a catcher, like spend time with the pitchers off the field, get to know them and what they like. Play Fortnite with them, get to talk to them, whatever it might be. But know what makes them tick and what their personality is, because that's going to make you a better catcher. It's going to make you a better coach. It's going to make you a better person in life. Is getting to know people. And that's number one on what we try to teach our guys here at Vanderbilt, is how to treat people in this life, and trying to make people um, respectful human beings, but also finding that edge on the field.
I try to get people or get my players to understand, like, being above anything else, being a good human is like, we're going to do things the right way. And
Hmm.
I'm going to try to treat you the way I want to be treated. Um, I want to have fun, but I don't want to have fun at the expense of the other team, right? So I'll allow some banter to go back and forth with the other team. I always tell my guys, like, listen, if we're gonna have banter with the other team, couple rules. One, make it fun, but make sure they know it's banter, and make sure it's not like it's not personal. You're not
Yeah,
you're not directing your banter at them. It's more of like, like, make it funny. If
yeah,
it's funny, I think 95% of the people of this generation, they understand that, like, you know, this is just normal baseball banter. But and then the other thing I want kids to understand is, like, and this goes to you saying be yourself. I think the most important trait anyone can have in life is being personable. And
hmm,
I know the the correct answer should be a good work ethic, but if you think about it, it's so much who you know in life instead of
hmm,
what you know and how hard you work. So ha- building relationships with people, being personable, and being a good human are like the top of the top. And
hmm.
I want to backtrack a little bit, body language. I'm so big on that as a coach on the field, because I don't think kids real. It's tough to realize what you look like, right? Like,
Yeah,
you don't realize when you do the littlest thing how it is portrayed by the pitcher. Like, the catcher, it's just even something small, like with their head, like a tilt back of their head.
yeah.
As a coach, what do you I don't want to say what are red flags, but what are some of the things that you see from body language, good or bad, that are red flags or green flags, when you're like recruiting a kid or your own players?
Yeah, I think a big thing is having enjoyment in the position. You can tell when a guy enjoys to be on the field, enjoys to be behind the plate. And a lot of that is just by how you take your field, how you interact with teammates, and are you an energy giver, or are you sucking it away, right? And when you see a guy throw his head down or throw his hands up or walk here and there, it's like you're not giving anybody energy on that. You are actually taken away from the connection with your teammates and with the game itself. And nobody wants to be out there to watch that. And so I think just having energy on the field, building people up. I love when guys take their glove or their mitt and just take their hand into it and say, "Let's go, let's go, let's do this right here." Like that is giving energy in a way. And then when somebody makes a good play, if somebody picks you up, make sure they know that that's a good play. It's a point, it's a handshake, if it's close enough. And nobody does connection like Vanderbilt. You can watch our games; it's always pointing, it's handshakes, it's connection between individuals that are trying to achieve the goal at the end of 9 innings or however many innings we have to play. But What we try to not get are those guys that are playing for themselves, and you can see that when we're out recruiting guys of who's worried about themselves. Are they trying to make it an individualized game by what they wear, by how they act on the field, by how they're doing their eye black, all that kind of stuff? That can be very individualistic, and those are the types of guys we want to try to. You don't want to. I don't want to say it's a terrible thing, but also you have it's a team sport. And a lot of times we look at this as an individual sport and showcases and lessons and all that kind of stuff. But it takes 9 guys on the field to win a game, you know? So being that connective teammate, but also having strong chest, shoulders back, confidence in how you walk, confidence in how you move, and doing things the right way are what we really try to look for.
It's it's such a fine line because obviously we want players to be themselves,
Mhm.
but we also don't want guys that are bring too much attention or they're too loud,
Yeah.
and not in a talking manner, right? Like,
Think about Clark Kent, right? He brings no attention to himself. He's a normal guy. But when he has to go be Superman, he is a bad dude, right? Like,
yeah,
think about that in between the white lines. You can be Clark Kent off the field. You can be humble. You can be have no ego, be a nice guy. But then when you get on in between the white lines or on the field, now you're Superman, right? Like you put the vest on, you put whatever you have to do to get into that mindset of competition and being somebody else in a way is what you have to do. And so you talking about body language, sizing each other up. When guys walk on the field, you're getting sized up. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care where it's at. The other team is looking at you. Are you defeated when you walk on the field, or are you coming in as a team? Coming in as like, whoa, you know it. Every baseball guy knows it. Everybody in sport knows it. Where guys walk on the field and you're like, whoa, they're here. Like you don't want to play those guys, right? Like you know what I'm talking about when I mean that. Like
oh
that's like the
yeah, yeah,
lion
yeah,
pack
yeah.
walking through the jungle. Like oh, I don't want to mess with them,
It
right?
starts when you get off the bus, bro.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's getting off the bus. It's the, the psychology of the human brain is ridiculous. It's when you have guys that talk about winning in every facet. It's getting off the bus. It's you look out, and if you know a team is good by their record, by perfect game rankings, whatever, and then you see they come into your field and they're organized, and
Hmm.
all of their bags are in the same spot in the dugout,
Hmm.
and then all of them are going out like a small little army to the right field, and they're stretching and getting loose, and they're zoned in, but they're also having conversation, and they look like they're having fun, but they look like they're gonna beat your ass. And I tell my guys like, we play perfect game tournaments, and there's consolation games and
Yeah.
game or games that don't matter, whatnot. I tell my guys all the time like, I don't care that if we win or lose this game, we go here or go there. That team is trying to kick your ass today. Have a little pride.
Yeah.
And my high school coach used to say, beat them in pregame. Literally take the crispest IO you can. So they're like, we are
Yeah.
done today. We just
Yeah.
pack it up.
There's something that goes on in the mind where you're like, whoa, I don't want to face those guys, and it goes back to a lot of physical appearance too. You know, we're talking about body language and that kind of stuff. It's how you look in the uniform too. Like there's that goes hand in hand. If a bunch of big dudes walk off the bus and they're organized and they look like whoa, you don't want to play them. That goes into your psyche as well, and so there is a big part of that, and I think if you're a young coach, young player, listen to this. It's like, what can I do to better myself? It's physical appearance. It is really just taking an act in how you handle yourself at all times. Whenever you walk on the field, whenever you walk off the bus, how are you handling yourself, and are you getting to that locked in state of where you can be Superman when you step in between the white lines, right?
It it, it reminds me of a story, and I'll be quick. I was coaching at Oglethorpe, and we had a pretty good team, but we weren't top. We were like 4 out of 10 in conference, maybe five. And we had a conference tournament, and our seniors, who this is the, this is the team that set the NCAA, where we led the NCAA in home runs per game.
Yeah.
Like, we mashed. We couldn't pitch and we couldn't field. They, going into the conference tournament, they all did weird shit with their hair, and
Yeah.
some of them bleached it, some of them got cornrows, like, and they wanted me to do that, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything with my hair, because even as a D2 player, I knew when I stepped on the field, I was going to ball out.
Hmm.
I could control that. So I can't control that as a coach. If we go out there and we get our ass kicked, and we got our hair looks stupid while we're getting our ass kicked, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you guys want to do that with your, I'm not going to tell you, like, team camaraderie, like, that's not where I draw. That's not the
Yeah.
hill I die on. I'm just saying, if you're going to go out, and I tell my guys all the time, if you're going to go out and you're going to draw attention to yourself other than your gameplay, you better be good, because you don't want to draw
Yeah.
attention.
You
You
better
don't want to
back it
draw
up.
attention to yourself. Yeah. The kid that had the braids that I argued, and he gave me the whole, well, you don't believe in us, you're not a team guy. He went out and had like 6 errors in the game, and whatnot. And it was like, this is what I'm talking about. Not only are you out there making errors on errors on errors, people are also looking at you because you have bleached hair with cornrows.
Hmm.
So draw attention to yourself. But if you're gonna draw attention to yourself, like, you better be a baller. You know,
Yeah.
you better go out, and that goes like what you're saying. You want to look good coming off the bus, and
Yeah.
put that fear into people. You don't want to look like a clown show.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I agree. Like you're sized up from the beginning, and talking about not drawing attention to yourself. We go back to where we went on this with catchers. Like, if I'm a catcher, you don't want to draw any attention to yourself. If you're back there and you're just receiving and doing your job and blocking and everything, there's not many people that from the normal eye that are just going to be like, whoa, look at that catcher, But the moment you miss a block, the moment you botched a ball, you don't catch it, that's when they notice you. So if you can go unnoticed, that that's a pretty good dictator of how you're doing back there.
It's funny how so many things, like, and this goes with recruiting as well. Like, sometimes you don't notice the good things, right?
Hmm.
But when he doesn't do that certain thing well, it's like, oh, he did this wrong, and this is what he didn't do well. But if he does it well, it's just more of, like, it's an understanding. It reminds me of when Coach Revolts from Notre Dame was on. He said, like, I know I coach at an academic school, but I'm not going to talk to you about your academics, because that's just an understanding that you do these things well,
Yeah.
and goes to the catching. Not many times are you going to be like, so and so caught, like, did you see that 0-2 ball, the way that he
Yeah.
quote unquote framed it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah.
that 0-2 pitch, if he catches it and takes it with him, it's like, yo, can you catch that right? Like, that's a
Yeah.
strike, And
Yeah.
it's funny the way
I
that
know.
works. It's
Yeah.
not always fair, but
Yeah,
it's
I know. Like, I find myself doing that all the time. Like, even with our guys, be like, "Why didn't you do this?" Instead of commending him for the 0-2 pitch that he actually framed, and we got a strikeout in a big spot, or the 2-1 pitch that he turned to a strike where it kept the count 2-2 instead of 3-1. It's like, man, sometimes I don't commend those guys enough for that, right? Because we only see the bad ones, or we only say something about the bad ones, and I try to be better about that. There's no doubt about it, because there's a lot that goes into it for sure, and it can be something that sticks out. But from a recruiting side, I think something that I always try to think about is trying to find reasons to commit a guy and not find reasons not to commit a guy. I think That's a big thing that when you go out to watch a guy is why why do we want to recruit this kid? What are the good things about him? What does he do well? Where does he fit in? And not so much of what he lacks. Yes, you have to look at that because that helps develop the plan of how we get him here and what we do with him when he gets here, that type of thing. But finding reasons to commit a guy and why we want this guy and where he fits in is something that I'm always thinking about when I go watch a kid or a team or whatnot.
It's hard as a coach, and I also try to be better of when guys do something well, even if it's very small, try to give them a pat on the butt, nice job, way to do this.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's a lot of things we just expect it, but
Yeah.
just the way humans are, and especially the way the new, generation of kids are, of they need to be told they did a good job. And I mean, I'm the same
Yeah.
way. My love language is affirmation. So
Yeah.
when I do something well, like I don't need a treat. I need just, hey, good job. I mean, you want to give me a Big Mac or something or a cookie, like I'm not gonna say no, but like I need just, hey, you did a good job on this. Like that's all I need, and I'm good. And
Yeah.
I'll run brick, I'll run through a brick wall, but I need some sort of that where I'm not second guessing myself of did I do a good job? Did I do this right? And I think we can all we can all do better as coaches, and that's one of the things that
Yeah.
it's very easy to be negative as a coach, and
No doubt. And I
it's
think a lot of times we're looking at you talk about this generation of athletes, and a lot of times is something that's a very viable question in the recruiting process with your guys, with my guy, with Vanderbilt guys, with whoever, right? Like, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? Because while they are the same thing, there is a very different mindset that goes into that. I think a lot of times guys now love to win. They love to win. And where if somebody asked me that, I would say I hate to lose because I don't want to look across the street at that other dugout and say, man, we lost to them, right? Like I hate to lose anything. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it is a game of cards. I don't care if it is a knockout game with basketball. I hate to lose. I hate it. It just doesn't matter. I hate to lose. But I think a lot of times guys, drivers, or they love to win. And I think that is the affirmation that they need from doing a good job is winning. And where I can be driven by the feeling of losing and not ever wanting to feel that feeling again. I think a lot of guys are driven by the affirmation of winning. You follow me on that one?
yeah. Um,
And I think that's a very viable question to a lot of guys, and a question that we have to ask ourselves a lot of times, and we have to ask our guys a lot of times because that might be how you coach them different or how they learn differently.
it's I mean, that saying's been around. You hear like a lot of, especially older guys say, like, I don't even get a ton of joy out of winning. It's when I get in my truck after a loss and I'm driving home, I'm more angry and pissed than
Yeah,
I am happy after a win. Like I
yeah,
think I mean I think at some point it goes back to expectations where you expect with your training and all that, like you expect to win, you expect to do well, and
it has to hurt when you don't, right?
yeah,
Like that's it has
right.
to hurt deep inside because you put so much passion and care and time and effort into it. It has to hurt. There has to be some kind of burning feeling of losing. Now, I will say this. I think there is something to be said about celebrating winning because winning is hard. We forget sometimes how hard winning actually is in this sport and doing it consistently. And you look at what Coach Corbin has done at Vanderbilt, like that is not easy. And so celebrating the wins anytime you can take them, I don't care if it is an ugly win, that's better than a game you played great and you lost. I get that. But there is a part that has to hurt when you lose. But I also think it's very important to celebrate when you do win. Like there is a part of that that has to be celebrated because this is a tough game, man. And when you put so much time, effort, and energy into it, whenever you do get the gratification of winning, like there is something to be said. Sometimes I'm at fault of this too. It's like not celebrating the wins enough because it's on to the next one. What can we do next? How can we get better? But sometimes I think that's something that I've learned here, and And even being in the SEC, like you play 10 weekend series against some of the best teams in the country. Like shit's hard. It is hard. It is
Yeah.
very hard to win. And you have to celebrate those moments when you do win. And it has to hurt when you don't.
I mean, there's a old saying, it's like celebrate all victories, and that celebration doesn't mean that you need to go out and get margaritas and cheese dip every time you get a win, but
Right.
even a good job, like it's people don't you lose sight of, like you said, how hard it is to win in the SEC. Same thing with like SEC football, right? Like it's so hard, like for Nick Saban,
Mm-hmm.
just getting to the playoffs. So many teams and fan bases are ecstatic with that, but it's like
Yeah.
it's almost like a curse to be so good, because it's like if you're not winning a national championship, you've failed. And
Yeah.
I think if you're not celebrating victories, small PRs, you're not celebrating when you get better. I think that's when burnout happens, and
Yeah.
that's when you lose your love of it. But you just need to know how much and how hard to celebrate, and you know,
Yeah.
it's celebrate. There's not two different types. There's a spectrum, right? Like you said, there's
Right.
a high five. Hey, you did a good job. Like, hey, that's a good win. Even though we should have won and we're expected to win, that's a good win, because it's not always a given that you're going to go out and win.
No, and you said, like you said, celebrate everything. PRs, weight room, breaking what your max is. That stuff is important. Those are wins, And but I will say this: that when you play in a series, where you play in a tournament for a perfect game, or you do whatever it is, where you have to play back to back days or whatnot, you can go to bed a winner, but you can't wake up a winner. And what I mean by that is you can celebrate that night and enjoy the win and have it um, and go to bed happy and all that kind of stuff. But when you wake up, it's time to go back to work. And if you still are a winner when you wake up, somebody's going to come in and beat you that day. And so finding that edge of waking up and putting your feet back on the floor and say, we got to win today. We got to win today. What can we do today? Yes, you might have beat a team 10-0 on Friday night because your Friday night guy just went out there and shoved and everything went into place, but it's a whole new team on Saturday. It's the same uniform, it's the same team name, but that's a new team coming in here on Saturday or whatnot. And so you can go to bed a winner, but you can't wake up one.
It's on a smaller scale. It's what I try to like get guys to understand, that like staying on that even keel of just from game to game or pitch to pitch, where
Mm-hmm.
you can't let your first at bat get you out your second at bat or your third at bat. It If you get a hit in your first at bat, that doesn't mean you're going to get a hit in the second and third one. You could get out in your first one. You could look awful. You could swing. You can get a sore. Like any of that,
Yeah.
you gotta learn to. I tell my guys, like, you got 30 seconds in the dugout. Be mad. Be angry. You should be, and
You
then
should be.
wash it. Like, go to the next
Yep.
inning and wash it. It's the same thing. You win a game. Be happy that night.
Yep.
When you go to bed and you wake up the next day, somebody's trying to come kick your ass, and you're in a new fight. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't carry over runs, you know,
No.
you don't
No.
carry over at bats. And I tell guys all the
Mm-hmm.
time, your next at bat, guys that are 0-3, 0 for 3, you tell them, hey, look, your next at bat is going to be the game on the line, and that's the only one that matters.
Yep.
Period. It could be the
Yep.
biggest one you got. Could be, you know, you just never know. That's why you have to wash it. You know, if it was a great at bat, celebrate it and then wash it. If it was a
Mm-hmm.
bad at bat, what did you do wrong? Let's learn from it and then wash it, and you go to the next one.
Yeah,
But
and I think we call that staying centered at Vanderbilt. It's like there's going to be all these ebbs and flows, and there's going to be high moments and low moments, but just staying centered and finding your way to get back to that center point, and really, whenever something goes wrong or it doesn't happen for you, just trying to redirect positivity to the next guy at the bat, and that's that connection piece. But also, you got to have releases yourself. You shouldn't be happy if you got out. You shouldn't be happy if the tying runs at third base with one out and you don't get them in, right? Like you should be mad, and that's okay. You got to have that release. But now we need you on the field. what can you do next, and to get that release and then go back out there.
Coach, wrapping up today, and I know we probably could talk for hours. We do a little thing called the lightning round.
Yeah.
It's we're the ATL Lightning, so me
Yep.
being the professional podcast host I am with the millions of listeners that we have, I needed to create a little shtick. So we call it the lightning round. Just short, quick questions with quick answers.
Let's do it.
Do you put pineapple on pizza?
No.
Artificial turf or natural grass?
Artificial turf. You've never been a volunteer assistant coach that had to take care of a field. You want turf, trust me.
Listen, I manage our fields for the ATL. So
There you go. There you go.
Thursday through Sunday in the summer for 16 weeks, we got a game at 9, 11:15. We have 4 days, sometimes more. I would do anything to go there at 6 a.m., empty the trash cans, open up the field, walk away. Come back at night, close it up. It would be great. The true baseball player in me and coach there's nothing better than natural grass. However, I do understand the benefits of artificial turf and the rain and I get all that. And
Yeah.
I think it depends on the situation. I mean,
I agree, but I'm always going to say turf. Yeah, there is something beautiful about a nicely groomed dirt natural surface, but the coach in me and wanting to play says turf.
I can't fault you for that. I get it. I totally understand. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
Ooh, you're like one of the. I think only 2 guys have said that. This is always such a big debate. People that don't really that weren't on a baseball team, they probably hear that and they're like, why are they asking is a hot dog a sandwich? But it's just a debate between baseball guys. So
it is.
You got
to say yes.
Pre-game superstitions?
Yeah, I would say that my biggest thing is just I don't even know if it's a superstition, but more so like a routine of what I kind of do after the anthem, whether we're on the road or at home, and just getting kind of in that mindset of playing. But also it's after BP of kind of just finding a release to just get away from the game, and do some other stuff before it's time to get in that mindset of playing.
Big Green Monster or Chicago Ivy?
Big Green Monster.
Who's your favorite baseball player?
Ooh, gosh, that's really shooting from the hip. I would say that my favorite player is I'm gonna have to go with of all. I'm just a huge Buster Posey fan. How can you not like him? Played every position in college, was a catcher at the pro level, won some championships. Posey
He did
is
it
the
all.
guy that I would have to go for. Yeah.
Are you pro or anti-shift?
Pro shift.
Day or night games?
Night games.
Pitching duel or offensive clinic?
Offensive clinic. Let's hit, baby. Let's do it. Let's go.
Big league chew or double bubble?
Big league chew. It takes you right back to the childhood days.
Favorite MLB ballpark?
I think you just have to go with Fenway. Like the history there is unbelievable. I grew up a Reds fan, so like Great American's cool to me just because I went there so much, but I'm always going to go with Fenway.
I grew up an Indians fan, and my college roommate is a huge Reds fan. We actually watched the game that you guys got no hit in the playoffs together when we were in college.
Oh, yeah.
To bring back bad memories for you.
I remember.
Favorite Gatorade flavor?
Fruit punch.
Give me the
fruit punch anything.
Give me the actual flavor, not the color.
Yeah.
A lot of guys just give color. I'm a basic person. I give color too, but Coach, that's all I got. Actually, Chico wanted me to ask you for a Corbin story. It can be anything. Funny, it can be great, it can be, what do you got? I mean, he's
Oh man.
a mythical creature to
Yeah,
so many
so
people in the
I'll
baseball
just
world.
so this I'll just say this, and this is kind of like the first Corbin story that I have. It's funny, but Corbin threw BP forever, right? Like he hits fungo now, but BP used to be his thing, and then kind of ever since he's gotten older, he's kind of give it to volunteers to throw, and he still hits every fungo. Like he's the most active guy on the field. There's no doubt. He brings more energy than anybody. But sometimes for the first round, before he's hitting fungos, he'll take a bucket and sit behind the BP thrower, behind the L screen. So you have the platform, the L screen, and he'll sit on a bucket to watch the infield because he handles all the infielders. He'll watch their prep steps and how they're moving and that kind of stuff. And so it's day one of Vanderbilt training for me in the fall of 21 when I got here. And I feel like I'm throwing pretty good BP. You know, I haven't really thrown too many balls and we're rolling through it pretty quick. And it's the last group. I threw all the BP that day. And he hits me. I throw 3 balls in a row, one of which I would say was a pretty good pitch. The hitter just didn't swing. It happens, right? Like as a BP thrower, it happens. And I'm throwing and he turns around and he's like, "Hey, Shu, you need me to throw?" And that is just a classic
He
Coach
domes you
Corbin
up.
story. Yeah, it's just straight dome. Like that is the classic Coach Corbin story. Is you hit a fungo or whatever, you need me to do it? You need me like we'll be hitting fungos or throwing BP or whatever it might be, and if you mess up a couple, you need me to do it. And the thing is that he can back it up. That's why nobody. That's why you get domed up is because you're like, man, this guy really can get up here and throw every pitch over the plate if he really wanted to,
Does he
and he can put
realize
the
he's
fungo.
doing that? Like, does he realize that he's like
I don't know.
just rent free in your dome when he does that?
I can tell you this: like he doesn't even remember saying that, but I remember it. You know,
Oh, of
there's little things
course.
like that happen all the time
You
where you're
feel
like,
about this big. You're like,
yo, I'm like,
that
oh
next
no,
pitch.
like, oh, I'm like, you're trying to extend out and you're trying to figure out like
You
what
got,
you can do
yeah.
to get it over
It
the
give you
plate.
like the yips real quick. You're like, you're tossing. Like, hey
And
guys,
you're just
next we're going underhand. We're going front toss
and
next round. No more BP,
then
guys.
you're just praying the hitter like, hey, please swing and please swing, like just swing, just give me something. And it was, I'll never forget. It was his name's Dom Keegan was who was hitting, and he was a catcher that year, first baseman. He went on to he's in the Rays organization, having a great pro career so far. But after BP, I was like, man, I needed you to swing so bad on that next pitch. He's like, I got you. And I'm like, thank God.
It's like, hey guys, Corbin's here for BP, so it's hit and run round every time, every time,
No doubt.
hit and run.
Hey, sure, you need me to do that? Yeah. So that was my
Oh,
first real Coach Corbin
I
story
would have shit my
on the field.
pants. I mean, I was I was a horrible BP thrower to start my career, and when I got to Oglethorpe, I remember like in the interview, it was like, "Can you throw BP?" I was like, I could throw all day long." He didn't ask me if it was
Yeah.
good. I could
Yeah.
throw all day long. I got Tommy John, so I got a new UCL. I got another 20 years out of this bad boy. I'll throw all day long. I never had any touch and any of that, so I was throwing and I was awful. It's either high and inside, or I'm trying to compensate that, so I'm low and away in the dirt on the other side. And I remember like Geo just being on the back of the turtle. It got to a point where I just wish he would have yelled at me or said anything. He didn't say a word, and he just let me throw all of it. And I got done. I was like, not my best. He goes, I can't throw every single pitch, so you just got to figure it out, buddy. And it was just
Yeah.
like that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Was like
Yeah.
he made me throw. So the more I did it, like I'm serviceable now, and
Yeah.
you just figure it out. But like, it's funny how
Well,
like
what people
coaches are
don't
so
understand
different.
is it's almost easier to throw the more that you throw. Like if you throw every day, it's almost easier because you get the feel down for it. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I take a few days off from throwing BP or we hit machines for 3 or 4 days and I don't throw and then I hop up on the mound to throw, that's when I have the hardest time. It's not that my arm's sore; it doesn't get sore, but it's like losing the feel of how hard you're throwing it or just out of your fingers. that's the difference in good BP and bad for me.
I I know for me, I figured out like I need to tell myself until I get in that groove that day is pinch your scaps and throw it from your ear. If I do
Yep.
that, I'm good.
Yeah.
I
That
mean,
was easy for me. I was a catcher, so that's normal strokes for
catchers
me.
always are the best BP throwers,
Yep.
hands
Yep.
down. So I
Yep.
I could throw strikes out, but I call it game ready BP because it's never gonna be right down the middle, and that's not on purpose. It's just like I'm all over the
It's not
zone.
feel good.
It's not feel good. It's not feel good BP because I can't throw it slow. I'm a little firm, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
saw you off, and then we're gonna go, dot an I on the outside corner. So, Coach, I appreciate you coming on
Love
today.
that. No, I appreciate you having me on. Wish you guys nothing but the best, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Yep. Take care. Later.